All right, our funding strategies. Thank you for joining us to explore this. Our theory of change has evolved over the many years, and we'll share a visualization of that journey in a few slides. What we're happy to share here with you is really the refinement of our thinking and refinement of our engagements. And as you can see here, we continue to have a refined aim to contribute to an economic reconciliation via these sub-strategies. And what you see here in front of you is the two ways in which this can occur. And to give you a sense as well, our approach over the last 10 years was to empower communities to determine the what, and we work together as good allies on the how. And I think what's come forward is a much better or a more comprehensive understanding of many of these prioritized what's. And so that's what we see here in strategy one, and which is the National Indigenous Economic Strategy. And so what we're inviting is Indigenous-led solutions to activate these very specific calls to economic prosperity. And within them, there's embedded strategic vectors as well that are very clearly articulated. The second strategy that we see here is to continue to support Indigenous-led collaborative funding models. This is something we've done for some time now in this strategy. And so, to invite the ongoing activation, I think, of communities' inherent and sovereign rights in some of these spaces. And this is one of the mechanisms that we try to apply. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Thank you. In terms of strategy one, so to walk it back a little bit, how did we get here? To give you a little bit of context, in 2019, the Government of Canada engaged the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. And what it was asked was to recommend how public policy and public investments could better be leveraged to support Indigenous economic development. And so there was a report that captured all of these recommendations that was shared in 2020, namely the Linked Indigenous Communities with Regional Development report from the OECD. And I'm just we're so grateful for the response that came, and what we witnessed as a response really was a collective of Indigenous organizations at various levels that began to work together to advance really this urgent piece of work. And they did it by developing collaborative models and approaches to Indigenous-led economic strategies. And a few years of work after this is the launching that we witnessed in June of 2022. And the open invitation to participate in the National Indigenous Economic Strategy. And the vision that emerged was one where socioeconomic parity would be achieved for Indigenous peoples in Canada. And for ourselves, examining this, knowing that the strategy was informed not only by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and its 94 calls to action, the United Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, as well as the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples and other instruments. And knowing that many of these have been around now for over a generation. I think RCAP's coming on 30 years in a few years. So there's been a lot of work that's happened in those generations that preceded mine. So just a lot of gratitude to them. And what we see here is a way to capture all of that was through the use of that iconography that is the circle. And it's what informs or guides the strategic pathways that really guide the strategy. And knowing that the circle is important not only symbolically, but also in the nation that I'm from, but in many nations across Turtle Island, a lot of our teachings are embedded in it. So a lot of gratitude for that. And to give you a sense in terms of our journey at McConnell, what we've done over recent months is after this open invitation was received, we connected with our network, our peers, our relatives, and many others to better understand what our role was as it related to the strategy. And I'll truncate it to this one sentence that was shared with us. The response was very simple: just do it. And so that's what we're here to share, is that we're understanding that there are many pathways here that are available that, as I understand the teachings that I have with the circle, it's not a static tool and it's not a static instrument. And it's one that I think there's some amazing visions that have been encapsulated within And what we see here is those in those four directions, starting with the people in the East and the vision of strengthening the capacity of Indigenous peoples, but also to empower them to better define, generate, and redistribute wealth in the lands. And so actually a couple of ways that we see that articulated within the strategy includes things like leadership and governance, and the activation of our social capital that exists in our nations, and activation obviously of our labor forces and labor markets amongst others. But also our relationship people with the lands, and knowing that Indigenous jurisdiction is key. And so the recognition and validation within international laws, including the United Declarations. And so really looking at the relationship of peoples to lands, as well as from the emergence of that relationship comes our infrastructure in many forms, physical and virtual. And so there's, again, I think, a series of calls there in terms of being able to have leading edge and cutting edge infrastructure and services in place to be able to really support a prosperous economy, not only for today, but for the future. And within that, the finance vision that is helping to achieve economic and social prosperity on terms of our various relatives. So to share, if we go to the next slide, please, a little bit more detail. What really we're looking to better understand in this and the 107 calls, first and foremost, just want to share that at this time, all 107 calls are open and that are currently eligible for support or consideration of support. And what we look to understand really is these three elements here, which is impact, how the proposal is Indigenous-led, and how does it derive systems change. So specifically, what calls will be supported or will be advanced, within the proposal, looking at how Indigenous peoples and folks are engaged and or leading the work. And thirdly, really thinking about how the project would advance either policies that encourage governments or other actors to fulfill their responsibilities as have been articulated. And we have officially launched this new strategy very recently, and the reality is we have two projects currently that highlight these ties. And so would point to them. And again, as we continue our journeying, our database will be able to provide you with many more, is our hope. So the first two that we have is the Indigenous Intern Leadership Program that is being supported at Vancouver Island University. And so this project was one, it's a joint initiative from the Business Council of British Columbia and the BC Assembly First Nations and Vancouver Island University, where they're supporting Indigenous graduates from 25 post-secondary institutions in British Columbia to engage in meaningful work through internship positions. And so what they do is they match skills and professional interests. And to give you a sense of some of the calls that are being advanced through this is developing mentorship programs, the idea of conducting labor force planning and labor market strategy development. It's also looking at workforce engagement strategies, as well as to continue to strengthen support for organizations that provide a focus on Indigenous skills, employment, and business training. The second example that we have to share is Indigenous Clean Energy. So it's a non-for-profit platform, that promotes Indigenous inclusion in Canada's energy futures economy. And it activates call to economic prosperity number 69, ensuring that Indigenous peoples have access to sustainable housing and home ownership. And yeah, so those are a couple of them. And again, we'll share the link to our database if you want to know more and to see the types of projects that we've supported to date. So with that, we'll pass it over to my colleague, Naomi.
All right, thank you, Brian. So now we're on to the second strategy, which is Indigenous-led collaborative funding models. I just wanted to sort of clarify, a collaborative funding model brings together a variety of stakeholders to contribute, to coordinate and leverage resources in a way that Indigenous communities are able to determine and implement their own solutions. So that's kind of like the general idea of what a collaborative funding model looks like. And we want to support organizations to prioritize Indigenous ways of being and knowing, and to work to redistribute power and resources to Indigenous communities. So when you're thinking about making an application to this part of the strategy, if that's what you choose to do, we really want to understand the impact, how the proposed work will shift the resources and decision-making back into Indigenous communities and directly benefit them. We want to know a little bit about the strategy you're implementing, like what issues you are aiming to address through an Indigenous-led collaborative funding project. And we want to know specifically how you are collaborating at what levels of Indigenous involvement, all the way throughout the creation, implementation, and evaluation of the project, and how does it aim to redistribute those resources and power back to the people. And then, of course, we want to know a little bit about what you need from us to support this. I think the next slide is a couple examples that we currently have. One of them is the Northern Manitoba Food, Cultural, and Community Collaborative. We've supported this collaborative since it started in 2013. And the collaborative aims to improve access to healthy foods and develop resilient local economies. So they work together to implement these activities as a collaborative. The second one is the Northwest Territories On the Land Collaborative, which we have supported since 2017. And this collaborative brings together government, charitable, corporate, and other partners to combine efforts and make it easier for communities to access money and other resources for on-the-land projects. So that in that instance, it's more about different levels of governance and different sort of bodies, for-profit, not-for-profit, philanthropic, to come together and find a solution for a community. Next slide, please.
Thank you. I was navigating between screens here. So as I shared earlier, here's a quick snapshot of our journey to date. And we recognize that reconciliation is not only personal, but it's also an organizational and systemic journey. And we're grateful for that first exchange that we had in 2003 that kind of gave our foundation a better understanding of some of the current realities. And we're trying to learn from wise practice, ceremonies, and teachings that we've received from various elders and knowledge keepers, and as well from Indigenous and non-Indigenous partners. So to all of you, we extend our greetings and our thanks for all that's been shared with us, and try to continue to bring this forward in a good way. And also recognizing that this year really is a landmark year for us, having been active in the reconciliatory space for over 20 years. And that's the reason why, as you'll see on our website, we've published articles highlighting our partnerships, but also as a way to give a little bit more context about our history and where we've been so far. And I also, as we've been refining our approach, I think is one of the important messages here that we want to share. And so you would have seen that in the second bullet in 2013, where we learned it was important to initiate the McConnell Reconciliation Initiative, but also as a way, I think, to signal to others the importance of that responsibility in that time and space. And a lot of work has happened since then. And so for us, really, to give you a sense, in 2021, the launching of our focus area of reconciliation, 2022, this engagement that we mentioned throughout this presentation, and this also led to, for example, a better understanding of where we currently reside and where we're headquartered, and how we continue to engage in those relationships and the current and looking forward to the long term. And again, trying to live into the responsibilities that we've chosen to pick up. And so this is a way for us, again, to steward our efforts in this generation, and recognizing that this isn't just a one and done opportunity, and it's something that is intergenerational in nature. And so looking to do so again in good relationship. So wanted to share that perspective. Thank you. Over the next slide, please.